Delta and Omicron and any other Greek alphabet variants we might have in the future. I did want to welcome all of our new members who have joined since we last met in person. And there's quite a little bit of a list here. I just want to read their names to you. And if they're here, if they can just stand up for a minute there, and we can welcome them to the Estate Planning Council. If you're on the screen, you can just wave to us from the screen, and someone may see you later. The ones that are here will have the green badges. We've got Megan Barkley from Canandaigua National Bank and Trust. Thanks, Jen. We've got Mark Lakney from Financial Partners of Upstate New York. There's Bill Brown from Canandaigua National Bank and Trust. Brittany Buffington from Elevatus Wealth Management. Charles Cox, and I apologize, I should be reading their designation as well. Brittany was CFP, Phil was an attorney, Mark was CLU and CHFC, and Megan Barkley was Esquire. We've got Andrea Gray, Esquire, from the law office of Andrea Gray. Got Donna Hitchman, Esquire, from the Hitchman Law Office. We've got Doug Hilfiger from Manning and Napier, and I know Doug's here. So we've got Sam Irving from David Kaplan Wealth Care Advisors. Ethan McKenney, CFP from Manning and Napier. Got John Maurer, CFP from John Maurer CPA. We've got William O'Donnell from AVH Investments. Andrew Parisian, CFP, again from Canandaigua National Bank and Trust Company. Kathy Pereira, CFP from Manning and Napier. Lisa Powers, Esquire from Paris Beach. Elizabeth Randisi, Esquire from Weinstein and Randisi. Megan Renato from CFP from Thorley Wealth Management. James Saylor, CPA from Gray Losi CPA, PC. Daniel Schmitz, CFP from Oakwood Financial Services. Kevin Schultz, CFP from Mapstone Veritas Financial Group. And finally, Christine Sevitt, Esquire from Morgan Stern DeBosick, PLLC. Now, it would be nice if every meeting in the future we could have a list of members like that, but I realize that we haven't read the list for about 6 meetings, so hopefully all of you can do your best to bring some new members to our organization. It would be great, especially now that we're starting to do some hybrid meetings, and maybe someday in the future we'll do all in-person meetings. Just want to remind everyone about the membership attendance requirements and dues. Regular members are required to attend at least 2 meetings during the fiscal year, and that runs September 2021 through June of 2022. Also want to thank all of our 2021 sponsors. They've been on the screen, but there's 5 platinum sponsors. Just wanted to point out as well. We've got Canandaigua National Bank and Trust Company Wealth Management, ESL Trust Services LLC, Finger Lakes Financial Services Inc., Welker, Moshe, and Del Vecchio CPAs, and Woods, Oviatt, Gilman LLP attorneys. So I just want to thank all of our sponsors as well, the platinum sponsors too. If your company wants to be a 2022 sponsor, please contact the EPC office, or if you're interested today, our communications chair, Vicki Klinghammer, is here, and she can take the information down for you, and the EPC office will be glad to bill you for the sponsorship for next year. Please remember, the speaker evaluation forms are on your table today, and either complete those online or in person as part of the continuing education credit process. It also helps with our upcoming programs. So if you have ideas for the upcoming programs, please put those down on those valuation forms as well. I just want to remind all lawyers that want to have CLE credit, they must enter the code numbers on their speaker evaluation form to earn the CLE credit, especially those that are watching online. And our speakers are going to be announcing the codes during the presentation. Also, the attorneys have to turn in the CLE board's revised attorney affirmation form, especially if you're watching this online. And that's available on the epcrochester.org website. Now I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Thorley, CFP and CLU, and the owner of Thorley Wealth Management, Inc., longtime member of the EPC. Thank her for coordinating this program as well. And now, Elizabeth, going to introduce some of our speakers.
Thank you, Don. So today I have the privilege of introducing our host of today's event, Seneca Park Zoo Society, CEO and President, Pamela Reed Sanchez. Pamela?
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm told I have 5 minutes, and those of you who know me know that's very difficult. So I'm going to do my best. I want to first thank a couple of people, particularly Buzz Code and Len Baer, who are on our Plan Giving Committee, our Forever Wild Society Committee for the Zoo Society. Buzz coordinated this today, and Len is underwriting it. So when you have a drink after this, give a toast to Len and Lori Baer, who are in the back of the room. Thanks, guys, for making this happen. We're privileged to be here today and tell you just a little bit about the Seneca Park Zoo Society and our Forever Wild Society. Okay, you've got the footer. Okay. If you don't know, the zoo is a public-private partnership. I'm with the Zoo Society. We're a nonprofit here, and our responsibilities at the zoo include education, outreach programs, conservation programs, as well as membership, marketing, communications, and of course, fundraising for all of the many needs of the zoo. We share a mission with the zoo, which is to inspire our community to connect with, care for, and conserve wildlife and wild places. And what I want you to notice about this mission is it's not about animals, it's about people. It's about moving people to the point where they care enough to make a difference for our environment so that the wildlife we love now is here for generations to come. And how perfect for Plan Giving to think about that our mission is about the long term, as is yours with your clients. Go ahead. So in terms of fundraising, we do, of course, we fund, we're constantly raising money for current operations, specifically for our conservation programs and our education programs. We also raise money for the capital needs of Seneca Park Zoo and the expansion, as well as Plan Giving, the Forever Wild Society. And I wanted to say just a little bit about, as you're thinking about clients, who is the Forever Wild Society for? First of all, it's for people who care about Rochester as a thriving community. Great communities have great zoos. The zoo is an anchor institution, and it's constantly changing and evolving, and zoos in the 21st century are economic development drivers, and they're education institutions, and great communities like ours deserve the best. And I couldn't resist just slipping in a couple of slides of what's to come and the capital things that we're working on, so just go quickly through these next 3. This will be the future entrance of the zoo when you come in 2024, and the new Tropics Complex, and then one more slide of the interior of that amazing building. So again, not necessarily for your clients, although if you have somebody who would like to make a difference right now, see Chuck or me. Go ahead. Forever Wild Society is also for people who want their gift to reach the entire community. The Seneca Park Zoo and the Zoo Society truly reach every segment of the community. And not just people with children, but adults too love the zoo. But we are an incredibly diverse organization. Our audience includes everybody in this community. You don't have to dress a certain way or have a certain education to feel comfortable coming to the zoo. The zoo, the Forever Wild Society is perfect for people who care about education. We serve tens of thousands of school children every year, both on-site and then tens of thousands through our outreach program. It's also, of course, for people who care about animals and wildlife. That seems obvious, but I didn't want to start there. It's for people who care about conservation, because we are so actively involved in saving animals from extinction at the zoo. And finally, the zoo, the Forever Wild Society, is a place for people who want their gift to provide hope. And that might seem like a strange thing to kind of end with here, but our job at the zoo and the Zoo Society is for every guest to leave feeling hopeful about the future, that their actions can make a difference for the environment and for the animals that they come to care about and love. Hope is a great motivator. And so it's part of what we do every day, is instill hope in the people that visit us. That's just a little taste of what the Forever Wild Society is and who it's for. And what I would hope that you would do is, when you talk to your clients about thinking about the Forever Wild Society and supporting the Seneca Park Zoo Society in this way, is that you encourage them to let us know that they want to include us in their estate plans, so that we can thank them now. You all have on your tables a Forever Wild Society brochure. I just noticed it's got a typo in it, so I'll get you a membership for the first person who can find the typo. We'll reprint these tomorrow, Chuck. But please let them know about informing us. We really encourage that. We'd like to thank them in their lifetime. While it's wonderful to hear about a gift after somebody has died, it's much more fun to thank them in person. A number of us from the Forever Wild Society Committee will be here throughout the program and afterwards to the cocktail hour. Chuck Levengood, who's our Director of Development, Tyler Castor-Peacock, who's our Associate Director of Development, Joseph over here, raise one of our committee members, and then of course Len and Lori and Buzz Code. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you for just a few minutes, and welcome back. I guess this is the first time you've all been in person. It must be a treat to be back together. Thank you.
Thank you again, Pamela. I would now like to introduce Nicole Morrow, local attorney, who is going to introduce our guest speaker.
And good afternoon, good to see your faces out there today. I was fortunate enough to meet Jay Harper several months ago through an old friend at Steeple Wealth Management, and I was immediately impressed by his experience, his collaborative style, but most of all by his charm and wit. I'm quite confident that you will enjoy listening to Jay Harper today, as he is sure to personalize what can sometimes be a little bit of a dry topic: trusts and fiduciaries. By way of background, though, Jay Harper is the Trust Director of Marketing and New Business Development at Steeple Trust Company. Jay has been in the trust industry since 1982. He is a longtime member of the Estate Planning Council of St. Louis, is chair of the Probate and Trust Law Steering Committee of the Bar Association of Metropolitan St. Louis, and is chair of the Missouri Bar's Corporate Fiduciary Subcommittee. Jay has authored numerous articles and presented educational seminars for attorneys, CPAs, clients, and financial professionals nationwide. Of note, Jay was an author for the Missouri Bar's desk book on trusts, powers, custodianships, and non-probate matters back in 2006. Jay graduated from St. Louis University School of Law, where he was assistant managing editor of the St. Louis University Law Journal. He is admitted in Missouri and Illinois, holds a PhD in philosophy from the University of Illinois, and a BA in English and philosophy from Ball State University. I am pleased to introduce to you all Jay Harper.
You're pretty sure.
I'm sitting here now.
Thank you. It's embarrassing sitting and listening to something like this. So I can only hope that that I live up to at least part of that with this presentation this evening. So I have had a lot of years experience in the industry. I can tell you I'm the oldest employee at Steeple Trust Company. My kids refer to me as an analog man. And they were kind of driven home to me yesterday. I was flying out from St. Louis. Stifel's headquarters is in St. Louis, and Stifel Trust Company is there as well. So I was flying out and had to connect through LaGuardia. And as I was standing in line to get on the second flight, I was watching all the people, you know, and they go up to the podium there where you get on, you show your boarding pass and get on, and everybody's got their cell phone out, right? And they hold up a little thing, beep, the next person comes, beep, and everybody's getting on the plane. I'm sitting here holding my paper boarding pass that I had printed out that morning, and I turned around. Behind me in line was a woman who was roughly my age, lighter hair, but roughly my age, also holding a paper boarding pass. So we looked at each other and just started to laugh. I said, it's a generational thing. That's the way that's the way it goes. But I still feel, like I'm going to be the one guy that walks up to the thing to get on the plane, and the cell phone's going to die right there. And so I hold on to that. That's my security blanket, holding on to that paper boarding pass. At any rate, I'm going to talk about choosing the right trustee. And usually, at least my experience has been, when speakers speak to that topic, they tend to approach it as though it's organized like this. How do you choose between having an individual trustee and a corporate trustee? That's not the way I'm going to approach the topic at all. I don't think that's the most helpful way to approach the topic. Instead, what has occurred to me over 40 years in the trust business, and also having to do my own estate planning for my own family, is that the problem isn't whether you need to choose between a corporate trustee and an individual trustee. The problem is whomever is going to be the trustee of the trust, using the right selection criteria. Use criteria that are relevant and not irrelevant. And it strikes me that's why things go awry, which I'm going to demonstrate here in just a moment. I think, in fact, and so this is a list of the topics that we'll go through. What can possibly go wrong? I've got some cases. I love reading cases. I've got some cases I'm going to share with you where things just go horribly wrong. The reason why things go wrong is going to turn out to be because somebody chose the wrong trustee to be in charge. I'm going to have a litany of things to look at in terms of suggesting a better way to choose trustees. And then we'll talk a little bit about trustees' fees and some other things at the very end. Gotta find a little clicker here. Whoa. So I believe that trustees, that attorneys and CPAs actually have an ethical obligation to know more about this topic and to help their clients make good trustee choices. I believe that if you look for lawyers, if you look in the rules for professional conduct, oops, I want to be past that. Now I know why my kids laugh at me. They're right. Whatever they think about me, they're right. Is that in the rules of professional conduct, attorneys are supposed to make sure when they engage in a representation that they can provide competent representation of the client, and competency is in the rules is tied to thoroughness. The representation has to be thorough. And how much, what counts as thoroughness is tied in the model rules to what is at stake. CPAs, I think, have a similar ethical obligation in their code for professional conduct as well. And I think that it has to do with doing additional research, making sure that you're knowledgeable on the topic, so that when your clients need assistance choosing the proper trustee, you can provide that assistance. So what's at stake? My friend and fellow St. Louis estate planning attorney, Clary Red, has expressed it this way. Lawyers can prepare estate planning documents of superb technical quality, but if the fiduciaries entrusted to implement the directives of those documents are inappropriate, the client's estate planning goals are likely to fail to be achieved, and they could even blow up entirely. So what do I mean by that? What does Clary mean by that? Let's talk about the Olson case. This little picture here is Olson Stadium at Morningside College, which is in Sioux City, Iowa. I've been there. And I took a picture of it, but I didn't think the picture was good enough for a slide. So I posted this one instead. But the Olsons were residents of Sioux City, wealthy people, very philanthropic people. And so they donated money to lots of the local causes, including Morningside College, which is where this stadium came from. Elwood survived Grace. Grace died first. And as we find in a lot of estate plans for wealthy individuals, at her death, her trust, they had separate trusts. Her trust was supposed to divide into 3 shares, right? So you've got the marital, you've got the credit shelter, and then over here you've got the GST exempt and the GST non-exempt. So it was to be divided into 3 shares. Well, Elwood thought that sounded like a lot of bother and a lot of trouble, so he didn't do it. He ran the thing as one fund, which I'm sure was more convenient. And in the process of doing so, I think he survived 12 years beyond Grace. And during that period of time, he made any number of distributions from that trust, charitable distributions, distributions to himself, so on and so forth. So that when he died a dozen years later, and his son then was settling out his estate, had to file a 706, and it zeroed out. No estate taxes due, which is great. As planning attorneys, that's what you plan for, right? You plan so that it zeroes out at the end. Well, the IRS took issue with it because zeroing it out depended upon the fact that all these distributions that came out, they said, well, that came out of the marital share and not from the credit shelter share. So our friends at the IRS said, wait a minute. How do you know those distributions came out of the marital share? There was no marital share. There wasn't any share. It was just all in one big pot. So the thing went to tax court and the estate didn't do well there. And so they ended up owing hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes and penalties because the trustee didn't do his job. The trustee didn't do what the document said. The document said, divide this into 3 shares. Trustee didn't do it. Here are some more cases, some more kind of interesting ones. Adkinson versus Commissioner. I like this one because it's kind of an unusual result, as I'll explain when we get to the end of it. So Melvine Adkinson was a very wealthy woman. And this is back in 1991, she funded a charitable remainder annuity trust with $4 million and named an individual to be the trustee of that trust. The trustee, the trust document, of course, directed a certain payment that was supposed to come out to Melvine on an annual basis. And she told the trustee, she said, I have a lot of money. I've got more money than I need. Don't send me that payment every year. I don't want it. It's just going to end up back in my estate. It doesn't need to be in my estate. I'm creating this trust to keep money out of my estate. So the trustee acquiesced, didn't send her annual payments from the trust. Trust terminated at her death and the money went off to charity. I don't recall off the top of my head what the charity was. And everybody lived happily ever after. Melvine didn't care that she didn't get the income. She didn't want it. The trustee, the charitable beneficiary was ecstatic, got more money than they should have hoped to get out of that trust because the income stream wasn't coming out of it year after year. So who do you think felt like their ox had been gored? Our friends at the IRS, because they were not getting any income tax on that income stream that should have been coming out of there for however many years that thing existed. I don't recall. And so they went to court, and the judge who wrote the opinion, it's an interesting one to read, was almost apologetic about it. the judge said, look, I know nobody got hurt. None of the beneficiaries got hurt here. But nevertheless, if the tax code says you have to do X, Y, and Z, then guess what? Boys and girls, you have to do X, Y, and Z, or you don't get the benefits that we offer for you. It didn't follow the letter of the law in the tax code. If you're going to qualify for the charitable reduction, you have to follow the rules, and the rules include paying out the income stream as specified in the trust. The trustee didn't do it. But again, it was a disastrous consequence. You know, not to mention the money that was paid in these last two cases to do the planning in the first place, and then it ended up being all for naught. The Hardy case. The Hardy case is a little more. It is a little more devious. So there was the beneficiary was part of a class action lawsuit, and this trust was a special needs trust that was created to compensate the beneficiary for injuries that were suffered. That was the base cause of the lawsuit to begin with. An individual was named to be the trustee of this case. And by the way, to go back to the Adkinson case, the individual who was the trustee in that one, in the crack that got in trouble with the IRS, was a lawyer. It wasn't, you know, just somebody off the street. It was a lawyer. Probably should have known better. But in this case, there was an individual. It was a family member who was named trustee of this special needs trust. And it wasn't a huge trust. It was around $500,000, as I recall, from reading the case. And within after the first year and a half of the existence of the trust, it was the trustees had made $120,000 worth of withdrawals. Some of that they spent on themselves. They bought a couple of nice cars and things like that. So this one is, you know, not so much a mistake in administering the trust, but this is outright theft by the family members who were trustees, and felt like because they were trustees, they had sort of carte blanche access to these funds that were in the trust. The Malwitz case. I actually know some of the people who were involved in that. I actually met them and spoke with them. And this is a case where there were two individuals involved, Ronald and Robert. And when Robert signed his will and his trust, he named his friend Ronald to be the trustee. It's one of those cases, you guys run into this all the time in your practice, where the older the client gets, the fewer and fewer family members there are to choose from. Maybe they're down to a niece and a nephew that they hardly ever see, and blah, blah, blah. So he chose his longtime friend, Ronald, to be the trustee of the trust. Well, Ronald again turned out to be less than trustworthy. And over a 3-year period, he transferred more than $1 million out of Robert's trust and into his own account. He spent a lot of that at the local casino, and for taking vacations and things like that. So that ended badly as well. He, as far as I know, he is now an all expense paid guest of the Ohio Department of Corrections. Last time I checked with it. So, you know, free room and board, I guess, is what he ended up getting out of the thing. Malwitz case. The Kenny case, which is a New York case, that's what I had recalled. This is one that has to do with a lack of diversification. All you trust officers, I heard a lot of trust people's names read in the new members, so all of you who are out there in Zoom land, and those of you who are here know that diversification is a big deal for trustees. And this is a case where at the time of the trustor's death, 85% of the value of the principal of the trust was in General Electric stock. And the trustee didn't deal with that at the time. They fashion, put off and put off and put off. Gee, you know, it did well for the family, and you know, all those things that we hear at the trust company when people come to us and they said, "Don't sell my General Electric, don't sell my my IBM, don't sell my UPS, don't sell my whatever it happens to be. And then, the trustee seems like we're insensitive and evil because we want to chop that concentrated position down. Well, in this case, the trustee didn't do it. And when General Electric fell precipitously and just dropped off the end of the table, the beneficiary sued, and of course they won. I can tell you that, and most trust people will, that courts don't have a whole lot of sense of humor around failing to diversify the assets that are in a trust. And so it's something you need to pay attention to. And finally, the Delaware case, the Menin case. Menin is a name you might recognize. Menin Speed Stick, Skin Bracer, they did products like that. I think in the meanwhile, they've been bought up by somebody else. I can't remember who, but that's where Menin comes from. There was a family member who was put in charge of a number of the trusts that had all of these, a lot of this Menin stock left into it. I think the estate was $600 million or so. And this family member fancied himself as kind of a financier, somebody who could identify real good entrepreneurial startup companies and put money in and make a lot of money. Well, he wasn't very good at it, as a matter of fact. He lost a lot of money doing that, and eventually was sued by the beneficiaries, and he was kicked out as trustee, and I don't know what he ended up having to pay in terms of damages. So the point of all of this, in spite of the fact that they're just interesting cases to read in the first place, which is part of the allure of reading cases, is that they all failed, not because there was bad planning that was done, it was all failed because the wrong driver was hired to drive the bus. And so, yeah, these people did the wrong thing, didn't divide the trust up and failed to diversify, and the trustees made some bad decisions and did some bad things. But I think you ultimately then also have to blame, part of the blame, maybe a good share of the blame, at the feet of the person who was the grantor of that trust and made that decision to hire that person, if you will, to be the driver of the bus. That's where, Dr. Phil, who says a lot of things, and a lot of them I don't agree with, but one thing that Dr. Phil said years ago when he published some kind of book on diet, and I remember listening to an interview with him, and he said, the choice about what you eat isn't made when you open the door of the refrigerator and look in. The choice is made in the grocery store when you decide what you're going to put in your cart. And that's kind of like this situation here. The choice of the trustee was made a long time ago by somebody else. So, you open the door of the refrigerator and you've got, the greedy neighbor as the trustee. That decision wasn't made that day. That decision was made when the estate plan was crafted. And so again, the point of this was to say that when the ethics rules for attorneys and CPAs in particular say that you need to be thorough and you need to be prepared in proportion to what's at stake, as you can see here by these cases, sometimes there is a lot at stake. So that's why I think that this is really an important issue. If you can't read that, it says, you'll need an executor. Which one of your children is less irresponsible than the others? And so that's kind of what I want to talk about next, is what I perceive is the usual kind of way that clients go about choosing trustees. And all of you have as much or more experience than I do in terms of talking to clients when they're in the planning phase of things. So hopefully you'll say, yeah, that's the way it goes. Maybe there are even worse examples, but it seems to me, and I understand I'm generalizing more than I should, but I call the methodology the oldest or the smartest. And it seems to me that a lot of times what people do is, there's a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth when you're deciding, well, who gets the share of the trust and who gets the share? Are we going to hold it in trust for them? Or are we going to give it to them? And who gets the stock in the family business? And who gets grandma's rocking chair? And, these things are people struggle with it. I know I did when my wife and I were doing our estate planning. Then it gets down to the point where, well, who's gonna be your successor trustee? Well, we'll name Junior. Junior's the oldest kid, we'll name Junior. And then off and running they go. So they spent less than 30 seconds talking about what may be one of the most important decisions that they'll make when they're setting their estate plan up. And so I call that the oldest or smartest method. The decision process is horribly flawed. And yeah, there we go. And so if you think about it, what is it about being the oldest or smartest that has anything to do with being a good trustee? And when you think about it, the answer is nothing. So I can tell you, again, part of what sort of motivated this whole thing is going through my own estate planning. I have 3 sons, and they're all in their 30s. So I needed to redo my own trust, because my own trust still talked about putting kids through college and all that kind of stuff. I don't need that anymore. They're done with that. So I'm readjusting stuff on my estate plan. And so I'm thinking, well, if I go first, and the statistics, don't favor husbands, and if I go first, I want that money held for my wife in trust for her benefit. No criticism of my wife intended. She's an artist, and so she is as far away from this topic as you could get, and really doesn't want to have anything to do with it. So, okay, have a co-trustee to serve with my wife. So who should I choose? And of course, the first name that came into mind was, my oldest kid. We'll put Joel in. He can be the successor trustee with my wife, and they can run the trust. And that's when it struck me. Wait a minute. I look at these 3 guys, and the one that is the oldest, he's an English major, and he doesn't know a dime from a dollar bill. He's not a spendthrift or anything. It's just that that's not the world he operates in. Budgets and making those kind of financial decisions and so forth. That's not where he lives. All right, well, that's knocks him out. What about the smartest? Well, Joel's probably also the smartest. I would never say that in front of the other 2, but I'll tell you what, the other 2 know it. They just don't want to hear me say it. But Joel spent a couple of semesters at Oxford, and he's lived in Korea, and he's done all kinds of things. Very smart guy. If you ever want to talk about movies, he's seen every movie in the world. He has opinion of them all, and he's my favorite person to go out and eat Asian food with, because he knows about all that stuff too. But again, nothing that would suggest him to be the trustee of the trust. The youngest guy, if it doesn't have a keyboard or a controller attached to it, he's not interested in it. So that leaves the middle child. So as much grief as we give to the middle child, that's who I picked as my middle son. When he got done with school, he moved back home. Dad, I'm going to save up some money so I can move out and get my own place. He devised this elaborate spreadsheet on his computer where he figured out, now if I'm going to move into an apartment, this is what I'm going to need on my monthly expenses. So this is how much I'm going to have to earn. This is how much I'm going to have to save. And he did it. And I thought, okay, that's my successor trustee, right? And so he was neither the oldest nor the smartest, but he was the most capable in terms of the skills that someone would need to have and need to employ to be a good trustee or a good successor trustee. So, what are those skills? Well, a good place to begin to figure out what those skills are is to figure out what the trustee's fiduciary duties are. To administer the trust according to its terms. That was something that Elwood Olson wasn't capable of doing, or wasn't inclined to do anyway. And that's why they got in trouble. He didn't have that particular bent or that particular skill or the awareness that this was something that was important to do in the job. To deal impartially with all trust beneficiaries. If I'll talk about this again later, but if the trust were going to have the 3 boys as beneficiaries and not my wife, I wouldn't name any of the three to be trustees of that, because it's just a real bad idea to have one sibling in charge of another sibling's money. So it makes a difference. You have to look at the particular situation and what are the facts of that situation. And those facts are going to rule some trustee choices out and make other trustee choices more viable. You know, my favorite one in the kind of oldest and smartest scenario, my favorite one, and you've all had this too, I'll guarantee you. My favorite one is where the client looks at you and says, oh, my daughter's a doctor, she can do it. Right. If there's one person on the planet that doesn't have time to be your trustee, it's your kid who's a doctor. Anyway. Unfortunately, the doctors don't always appreciate that either. Right. So the first thing I think you have to do is you look at the trustee's duties, see how that fits in with your universe of potential successor trustees, and who comes out ahead and who gets eliminated because they either can or can't fulfill all of those, keep accurate records. I talk about my youngest one that was only interested in something if it has a joystick attached to it. I see how he folds his clothes. It's basically you take the basket, open the closet door, you throw it in, and close the closet door, right? This isn't a guy who's meticulous about details. Probably not going to make a good trustee. So you look at it in context. And this is what you look for. What am I asking my trustee to do? There's all those trustee duties and responsibilities. What is the nature of my family and my beneficiaries? What is the nature of my estate? So it makes a big deal, right? If it's just a matter of pay dad's final taxes and doctor bills and what have you, divide everything by 3 and hand it out to the 3 kids, that's a very different job than hold money in trust for a spendthrift family members the rest of their lifetime. Very different jobs. So you have to consider these things in the context of the family and the situation that you're looking at. So here's my list. You would probably have a list that may overlap that, might have different characteristics, but this is my list of the characteristics that are important for a trustee or successor trustee. Honesty has to be way up at the top of the list. Have some kind of basic financial knowledge. They don't have to be a financial professional by any stretch of the imagination. They kind of have to have an appreciation for budgeting, for risk and reward if they're going to be doing some investments, asset allocation, or at least have the inclination to go hire a financial advisor to help them with that, and not try to do it, they'll open up the Wall Street Journal and say, okay, we'll buy this, we'll buy this kind of approach. Well organized, attention to detail, a good record keeper. I want to tell you that when trustees get into trouble, the extent to which they do or don't have good records is sometimes determinative of what the outcome of that is going to be. There was a case in St. Louis where there was a St. Louis lawyer who was serving as a trustee, and the beneficiaries were questioning where did some of this money go, so they sued, and the trustee, the lawyer who was serving as the trustee, was asked to produce for the court the records, and didn't have records that showed where that money went. There was not an accusation or any proof that he actually did something wrong, like took the money out and put it in his own bank account. It was simply the fact that he couldn't remember what happened to this money over time, where it went, what was it spent for, and so forth. So he lost the case, got tossed out as trustee. Again, what's important to the court is, are you following a procedure and can you document what you've done? It's very important. Stand up under pressure for others. That's a huge one, there's a case that I like to talk about of, let me find the right case. Sorry. here we go. This is the Brooke Astor case. You all know the name Astor, right? And she was married, her third husband was Vincent Astor, and he left her in control of the Astor Foundation, which of course had millions of dollars in it. She had a son from a previous marriage, and she relied, as she began to fail and she got bored, she began to rely more and more and more on her son for direction, for guidance, for advice, and how to manage this money. Well, he was in turn married to a wife that had no limits on her ambitions for spending money. And so there was a lot of, what we would call pillow talk in the background. You should this and that, and get your fair share, and blah, blah, blah. You guys have heard all the same conversations. And if you're going to appoint somebody to be a trustee, a family member to be a trustee, they have to have the kind of personality that allows them to stand up to that kind of kibitzing going on in the background, that kind of pressure in the background. He couldn't. And so he withdrew substantial sums of money and ended up getting in pretty good trouble for having done so. So let's talk about corporate trustees for a while, because I don't want you to think that I'm picking on individual trustees, because I don't mean to do that, even though a lot of the trustees involved in the examples and the cases that I've read have been individuals. I think another one of the mistakes that people make when they choose trustees is they think of corporate trustees as being kind of fungible, as all being sort of alike. Well, they all do kind of the same thing, right? Well, yeah, in a sense we all do. We administer trust, and so we invest the money that's in the trust. We have trust administrators then, who make decisions about discretionary distributions, pay bills and all that, and we keep records and pay the trust taxes. It's kind of the same basic list of services that all corporate trustees are going to perform. So we're all the same, right? It doesn't matter. So sometimes, at least it used to be the case when I was young and first started in this business, that when it got down to the choice of trustee, if there was a reason to prefer a corporate trustee, the estate planning lawyer would ask the client, well, where do you do your banking? I do my banking at such and such a place. All right, we'll write that in as the corporate trustee. And that's kind of the corporate trustee version of the oldest and smartest decision process that often goes through with respect to individual trustees. Or these days, I don't see that as much, but what I see instead is a lawyer will contact me and, I've been engaged to do Mrs. McGillicuddy's estate planning, and want to know if you can send me a copy of your fee schedule, as though choosing between corporate trustees is a matter of lining up 5 fee schedules in front of you and say, okay, well, this one's the cheapest, that's where we'll go. Well, those criteria, where do you do your banking, who has the cheapest fee schedule, are every bit as irrelevant to the trustee selection process for corporate trustees as choosing the oldest or smartest kid is for choosing individual trustees. That's my thesis anyway, and I'm not going to give it up. We'll talk about fees here in a minute, but if you want to sort of think of an analogy, if you think of fast food hamburgers, and all of us are guilty of that pleasure every now and then, they're not all the same either, right? When you start to think about it, it makes a difference whether you go to McDonald's or Wendy's or White Castle or Steak and Shake or In-N-Out Burger or Five Guys. It's all fast food burgers. It's all 2 pieces of bread and a piece of meat and cheese and some stuff slathered on top of it, but they all taste very different. And so it's kind of that way too, I think, with corporate trustees. Corporate trustees have personalities as well. So these are what I think are some of the personality factors, if you will, for corporate trustees. So size. Size can make a difference. It can make a difference in any number of ways. certainly, in most trust documents that give somebody the power to remove and replace the trustee, there will be some kind, there often is, not always, but there often is something that talks about either assets under management or capitalization. And the point of putting that kind of thing in there, Mrs. McGillicuddy can appoint a new trustee, but A, it has to be a corporate trustee, and B, it has to have, whatever, $50 million worth of capitalization, or $2 billion worth of assets under management, whatever it happens to be. And the reason why is because you and your client want to make sure that it's not sort of a fly-by-night kind of choice that they make. It's not going to be Joe's Pizza and Trust Company that's going to end up running this thing. It's going to be a legitimate concern. So, so I get that. So size can matter in that respect. Size can determine sometimes service model. And so I'll talk, and this is going to be a little bit cliche-like, but again, my experience and all the years that I've been doing this is it's fairly true, certainly with some exceptions. But sometimes the trade-off is with the larger institutions. You get that, you get a larger institution with a lot more backing in terms of capital and assets under management and all that kind of thing. But with that comes a lot of institutional baggage because they are so big. So when there needs to be a discretionary distribution that gets made, I know there's one large bank in our area in St. Louis, and their discretionary committee that makes decisions when clients say, I need money out of the trust for this or that, it meets on the third Thursday of every month. So if it happens to be the fourth Thursday of the month and you make your request, nobody's going to act on that request until 4 more weeks or 3 more weeks rolls around and you get to the Thursday of the next month. Smaller banks in my and trust companies, in my experience, tend to be more flexible. Okay, well, we meet every week, or we meet whenever we need to, or whatever. And so size can make a difference in service model. A smaller bank or trust company is less likely to give you an 800 number to call if you're a trust beneficiary. A larger bank is more likely because they'll have a call center in Dallas or Minneapolis or wherever it happens to be. So in that way, size can cut both ways. And I'm not making any value judgment here, which is better or which is worse, just as I'm not making any value judgment for you in terms of should you name a corporate trustee or should you not, even though I work for one. I'm just pointing out these are factors that ought to be taken into account. Special assets. I'll jump right to that one. That's where size can make a difference. So it may be that a larger bank, trust department, may have specialists that deal with oil and gas and mineral interests. They may have specialists who specialize in holding closely held business interests. They might have specialists, certainly in my neck of the woods across the Mississippi and Illinois, lots of banks have farm managers on staff. Maybe you're less likely to find that in a smaller bank than you are in a larger bank. So if that's what a good part of the estate is going to be made of, then that probably mitigates in favor of a larger bank.
Our first
So how do you-
code is
how do you make this decision?
9517. Again, the code is
I see 2 things that you can do. You
9517.
can interview and you can test drive. The interview process for a personal
9517.
Potential corporate trustee, describe for me your service. What is the typical account load for your trust officers? It makes a difference. Again, you're probably likely to find lower account load per trust officer at a smaller bank or trust department than you are at a larger bank or trust department. Do you use proprietary investment funds? In other words, in-house funds, as opposed to funds that you go out and buy in the open market. That can make a difference. For example, I know in one case that I was familiar with, there were beneficiaries who were interested in moving the trust account from one trustee to another, one corporate trustee to another corporate trustee. The problem is the proprietary investment funds couldn't transfer outside of that bank. So they had to stay. So what that meant is anything that was held in those proprietary funds would have to be liquidated and sent out as cash. So there's no way to rationally control realization of unrealized gains because it had to be reduced to cash in order for. So the beneficiaries, in essence, were stuck between a rock and a hard place. We want to move this trust, but we're going to have to pay a price if we want to move it because it's stuck in there. So things like that can make a difference. Interviewing potential individual trustees, which might seem silly, especially if an individual potential trustee is a member of the family. I say, I know these people. I see them, every year at Thanksgiving dinner. But find out what they know. Find out what they understand. You know what a mutual fund is. Can you tell me about your siblings? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Do you want the job? I find that 90% of the time, nobody's asked the individual if they want the job. And again, my experience, because usually when I see the case, it's after mom and dad have both died, and the individual has been struggling for the last 2.5 years to be a trustee, and they finally come to us and they say, "What can we transfer this account to you? I don't want to be trustee anymore." Well, nobody ever asked. Nobody ever asked. Test drive. There are some ways you can test drive a potential corporate trustee. You can open a custodial account. They're relatively inexpensive. You're using the bank strictly as a custodian. You're not asking them to invest any money, make any investment decisions. And you can get a sense for, are these people easy to deal with? Do they make mistakes in the account? Are they prompt if you say, I need a distribution from this account, or I need you to pay some bills from the account? Does it get handled well? If you want more than that, you can open a managing agency account, which is kind of that plus investment management built on top of it. If you want to get a little bit of a handle on how does this bank or how does this trust company invest money. You can test drive potential individual trustees as well. So give them $100,000 to invest. I don't mean literally. I mean one of those exercises where you give them $100,000 to invest, and they have to keep track of through the Wall Street Journal or whatever about how they're doing. And at the end of a certain period of time, you see how have they done. Put him or her in charge of paying some of your bills, and see whether they can keep that straight and keep good records and keep bills from getting past due and all that. And hypothetical. So you ask them a question. What would you do if blah, 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 blah? How would you handle it if your mother said, I want to sell this house and buy a bigger one? Hypotheticals that are going to vary depending upon the facts of the particular situation. So let's talk about fees, because that's the 400-pound gorilla here. Oftentimes I think that people choose an individual trustee and don't even think about a corporate trustee because they're convinced the corporate trustees are horribly expensive. So I'm going to choose an individual instead. And the whole point of this slide is to say corporate trustees are always either more or always either less expensive than an individual trustee. It'll depend on who the corporate trustee is. It'll depend on whether you put a provision in the trust document to pay the individual or not. And by the way, it's sort of a pet peeve of mine when the family nominates a family member to be a trustee and they say in the trust document, no family member shall receive compensation for serving as trustee. Wow. Thanks, Dad. I mean, a lot of times the family members don't want to take a fee, but that should be up to the family member, not something that Dad hardwired into the document. But what I've done here is I've given 3 examples, and it's all in the handout if you download the materials. Tommy Trustee is an individual who takes no fee. Susie Successor is an individual who does take a fee, and I just picked 1/2 of 1% as a number to pull out of the air. And Friendly Bank, of course, charges a fee. I peg their fee at 1.25%. Again, some are going to be more, some are going to be less. And as you can see by the numbers on the bottom line, it doesn't really differ that much at the end of the day. And one of the reasons why is because the individuals have to go out and purchase services that are included in the corporate trustee's fee. So at the end of the day, it's kind of a wash. At least there's not, if there is a difference, it's not a significant enough difference to ruin somebody's life by making them a trustee of the trust when they didn't want to do it in the first place. When you must consider a corporate trustee, just real quickly, if you haven't gathered from some of what I've said, that if you're going to have, you know, Susie and Johnny, and Susie gets her share outright, and Johnny's share stays in trust because he's a spendthrift, for God's sakes, don't let your client name Susie as the trustee of Johnny's trust. And then on top of it, expect her to add for free. My experience, again, over lots of years of doing this, is this kind of situation alters the family dynamics forever. There's no recovery from this. You know, it sort of starts off with, you know, I need some more money for this. I need some more money for that. And, you know, on the one hand, Susie doesn't want to fight with her brother, but on the other hand, she feels an obligation toward dad, who put her in charge with the expectation that she would sort of rein in her spendthrift brother a little bit and keep him from blowing through his inheritance prematurely. And then it, you know, gets to the point where it's, you know, dad didn't want you to keep me for my money, kind of thing. And then it comes to, I hate you. And then it comes down to, I'm going to sue you. And that's kind of progression that this follows. So, you know, I've just seen it over and over and over and over and over again. And those of you who have been in practice longer have probably seen that over and over and over again as well. This says, this is our daughter, my son from my first marriage, John's daughter from his second marriage, and I have no idea who the one on the end is. Boat on the reef, that's my symbol for another one of those situations that's kind of like that, is where the parents trust their own kids just fine. Who they don't trust is their own kids' spouses. And what they're concerned about is, I don't want the money that I've worked hard and I'm going to leave to you to end up in this other family. You know, I want to keep it within our family. Good place to insert a corporate trustee who's independent, doesn't have a dog in that fight, and will certainly be impartial to everybody. This is my very last topic I want to put on here. Trustee IRAs. You may or may not be familiar with the concept. So most IRAs, when you and I go to the bank or go to the broker or dealer to open up an IRA account, is going to be a custodial IRA. The firm, the bank, whoever is holding them, is holding them as a custodian. They're not making any decisions. The bank isn't making a decision on how to invest those funds, when to take funds out, how much to take out. That's all up to either the account owner or the beneficiary after the account owner's death. The financial institution is just a custodian that's holding it. The difference with a trustee IRA is that it's not in the hands of a custodian, it is in the hands of a trustee. So trustees are able to make discretionary decisions with regard to the assets that are in a trustee IRA. Why might that make a difference? You know, big deal, so what? The big deal, so what, is that in a lot of estate plans, I see this a lot, where say our trust company might be named to be the successor trustee. Maybe we're also named as a beneficiary on the IRA, the trust of which we're going to be trustees, named the beneficiary on the IRA. Why did mom or dad do that? Because they don't have any family members that they trust to be the successor trustee and to have that they would name as beneficiary of their IRA. Well, unless there's a pretty carefully drafted power of attorney that's going to give somebody access to that IRA in the event of the account owner's incapacity, there's going to be a gap where the account owner is still living, so the beneficiary designation doesn't click in, but is incapacitated. So if it's like a lot of families that I see, where there's a substantial amount of money in retirement funds because it came from a rollover of a 401k or something like that, you're going to have a big pot of money that the incapacitated client may need to help sustain them during their period of incapacity, but nobody has access to it. The trustee doesn't, because the beneficiary designation doesn't click in until the account owner's death. And if there's not a power of attorney, nobody else has access to it either. The client can't access it, the client's incapacitated. So what a trustee IRA does is a trustee IRA can provide that during that period of incapacity, the trustee of the IRA can access those funds. It works well in that kind of case. It works well in a second marriage, his kids, her kids kind of space. You know, at my death, I want my IRA to continue for the benefit of my spouse. At her death, I want it to go back to my kids and not her kids. A trustee IRA can do that. If all you do is name the spouse as the beneficiary of the IRA, and most IRAs will do that, will name the spouse as the primary beneficiary. Then what happens, to go back to the stand up to pressure kind of thing, is eventually mom and dad's, her kids, the spouse's kids, I say her because my spouse is her, will be, you know, talking in her ear about, you know, this money and blah, 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 and dad and treating the kids unfairly and blah, 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 blah. And pretty soon she'll end up changing the beneficiary on that IRA so that it's all the kids or so that it's her kids. And that comes from real court cases that I've read as well. I've got a handful of those where that kind of thing has happened as well. Beneficiary got changed because it was a custodial IRA and it was hers to change as the beneficiary, as the spousal beneficiary. So now I've got to finish off just some stupid stuff. We'll go through these quickly. The fact that my trustee here under, this is all real language, came under real trust documents. I see these every day. The fact that my trustee here under may be interested in any such business as a director, stockholder, manager, agent, partner, or creditor shall not constitute an adverse or conflicting interest. Of course, it's an adverse or conflicting interest. Right? You can't say it's not, it is. You can say in the language of the trust, but that's okay with me. But you can't, you know, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. In the state where I grew up in Indiana, the legislature tried to legislate the value of pi. You can't do that. It is what it is. Right? I don't care what the legislature said. The trustee is authorized to disregard any principle of investment diversification as long as he considers it's advisable to do so. When would I ever think it was advisable to do that? Is one of my favorites. So an attorney that I knew in St. Louis, real likable fellow, I still like him. He's retired to this day. He was really struggling with an irrevocable life insurance trust that had hanging powers in it. And those are difficult. I mean, I'm not a tax guy. You know, when Elizabeth said, we want something lighter as a topic, you're not going to get me up here quoting code sections. That stuff gives me a headache. But he was struggling with how to do this, and he would draft this thing. We would review it, we would come back and we'd say, "Man, you've got a lapsing problem here. You haven't dealt with the lapsing problem." We would try to explain the lapsing problem, make another draft, and came back and still it hadn't understood what we meant by a lapsing problem. Wrote a 2-page memo to him and explained it, and it came back, and the way he fixed it was he put this in the trust. This shall not be a taxable event. All right. Why weren't the rest of us smart enough to figure that out? How helpful do you think this table of contents is? Ridiculous. And this one, in the event that I am unable to serve as executor of this will, you know, chances are pretty good at that. How did I know that this guy drafted his own will? That's all.
The second code is 7539. The second code is 7539. CLE code, the second code is 7539.
Well, once again, I'd like to thank our speaker, Jay Harper, from the Stifel Trust Company. Does anyone have any questions? And if not, if there's none online, did want to present just a small token of our appreciation for your speech, and that's a small little gift set of a pen. Thank you
very much.
Just don't write on your written ticket on the way home there. I want to cross off the barcodes on it. Again, I wanted to thank our Seneca Park Zoo Society for sponsoring this event, as well as our longtime EPC member, Ralph Buzz Code from Boylan Cove, for hosting the event here at GBC as well. Thank you very much. Our next meeting is also going to be a hybrid meeting on Social Security. And if you want to just note the date, it's going to be January 26, 2022. We're still trying to nail down the event location for that, given the Omicron variant, and whether or not that's going to change where the location will be. But look in your emails for that next event. Again, we'll adjourn now for networking, but keep in mind too that while you're networking, our new members have green badges, the board members have blue badges, and the guests have yellow badges. And we have a question in the back. Jen.
We need a CLE code, a continuing ed code to the arrears, and we get that form from online. Is that what you do?
Okay, yeah, the form is online, and since there wasn't a CLE code announced, I'll just make one up right now. And I wrote that down just in case I needed to make one up. Oh, Karen's got one.
The codes are for online only. If you are in person, signing the goldenrod sheets on the table will suffice. Thank you so much. And I gave codes on the webinar, 2 different codes at 2 different times.
Okay, so we're all set there. Don't listen to the one I made up then. And thanks for asking the question.
Just repeat that so that the people online can hear that.
And for the people online, there was already 2 codes that were given by Karen at the EPC office. And you just put those on, and there's a form online that the attorneys that are listening online will have to sign. And then for those attorneys here in the audience, again, on those goldenrod sheets, just sign out. You're supposed to sign in when you came in. So if you forgot to do that, just sign in and then make sure you sign out again as well. And thank you very much. We'll adjourn for networking, and hope to see all of you later, as well as everyone that's online. Take care.